Are you new to running tabletop role-playing games? Here are 5 of my favorite tips and tricks for new GMs and DMs, and we're starting right now. If this is your first visit and you want tips and tricks to make your role-playing games a little bit more awesome, start now by subscribing and hitting the bell so you can stay in the know. So you're new to running the game, and you want to do it right. You want to impress your friends. You want to have a good time. But how? All of this stuff probably seems super complicated, but good news, it doesn't have to be hard. You just have to get a few things right, and those things ultimately are pretty easy. Today, we're going through 5 of my favorite tips for new GMs and DMs, and while I can't guarantee they'll make your games awesome, you could do a heck of a lot worse than following this advice. And stick around to the end for a bonus. Are you a veteran DM or GM? Impress us with your best tips and tricks down in the comments below. But now, on to the countdown. Number 5. Building all the things is hard. And where the heck do you start? Wouldn't it be better if someone did all that work for you? Good news. Most RPGs today have a wealth of adventures you can run from a book, like this one. Someone else has done the work for you, but this isn't without its issues. I mean, you should probably read the whole thing, familiarize yourself with all the major points. You know, the maps, and the bads, and the twists and the turns, the dungeons, and the dragons, if there are any. And try to condense all that stuff into a form you can use at the table, because you don't want to be flipping through this giant book all night. One way to condense stuff is to write stat blocks on note cards for easier reference, like this. As a bonus, if these are NPCs, you can put some directions on there too. Notes on their voice, on their mannerisms, whatever notes you have from your adventure, their clothing, you know, that kind of stuff. And you don't even have to run the game the way they say you should, unless you really want to. It's your game. Do what makes you and your players happy. And if you do want to build your own stuff, that's great. There's lots of great advice out there on the YouTubes and the internets, but that's a topic for a different video. Number 4. Try to get a handle on the game's mechanics. Most RPGs are awfully complicated these days, and their rules like to come in these heavy, multi-volume sets like this. Your players will probably look to you for details on how stuff works. You're the authority now. You don't have to learn every rule, but a good grasp of the fundamentals is a good place to start. This is especially true of spells, which 5th edition has in spades, and which are awfully complicated. Seriously, I've read dissertations that are less daunting than these spells. If you have the luxury of knowing what characters your players are playing, learn the basics for those classes and start at level 1 so you have the smallest amount of stuff to learn. Avoid, with all of your might, the temptation to flip through one of these books at the table. If you get really stuck, make a ruling and move on. Think rulings, not rules. If you got something wrong at the table, talk it over with your group next time, and try to accept that you're occasionally, every once in a while, going to mess something up. It's okay. We all mess something up every once in a while. Heck, I mess up stuff all the time and I wrote my game. I got no one to blame but myself. Most of the time it's better to move on and sort it out later, which brings us to our next topic. Number 3. Try to keep up the pace. And if you were paying attention in number 4, you already heard a few of these tips. It's our job as GMs and DMs to keep stuff going so folks don't get bored. And if folks are getting bored, blam. It's more important to make a ruling and move on than looking stuff up, unless it's really vital to what's going on, and it usually isn't. The game will super slow down, especially if your players want to get all rules lawyery, and one place where it's the worst is combat. If your combat rounds are bogging down, ask folks to figure out their actions before their turn. This is especially true for spellcasters. Make it your players' responsibility to know how their spells work before their turn. Most RPGs have fixed initiative orders, and even then you can prompt them by saying who's next in the order in case they forgot. And if it gets really bad, use a sand timer like this one. Just sticking it down is usually enough to get the point across. The game will also bog down if your players are too risk-adverse. Our games are about risk. You can't avoid it. Conflict is where growth and drama happen, but given their choice, many players would avoid it entirely, which leads to the dreaded, "At dawn, we plan." We aren't playing lawyers and librarians here, people. If your players are taking too much time planning, roll initiative and throw some freaking goblins in there. Or as Matt Colville says, orcs attack! Number 2. A rare piece of advice is, try to be the player character's biggest fan. This is a cooperative game, and we are players at the table too, just ones with a little bit more work to do, but that's okay. Players will come up with all kinds of crazy ideas, but we're not here to show them how they fail. We're here to narrate their best attempts, and hopefully their heroic successes. It is way too easy for the game to become adversarial, but this is not how to get the best out of our hobby. Try your hardest not to thwart their progress and make it clear that it's the bad guys that are causing them trouble. I'm not trying to kill you. It's those fireblades over there that are trying to kill you. Try to give each player their moment in the spotlight. It's easy for a few of your players to become bored, and you can usually tell when they're bored because they'll be looking at these guys. Everyone wants to feel special, and we have to be careful that the most vocal players don't dominate our games. Pass around the proverbial microphone so everyone gets their chance in the spotlight. Try to highlight what makes their characters cool, every chance you get, and try to encourage them to take risks because heroism is awesome. Number 1. Occasionally, you'll run into issues. Expectations that aren't aligned. Behavior that's disruptive. Folks might be doing something bad or might not be doing something that's important. Whatever it is, talk to your players. The earlier you do so, the easier it will be to solve whatever issues you're seeing. The longer you let it go, the harder it'll be and the more pain it'll cause when you finally get around to it. And this works for non-gaming stuff too. In the opposite direction, feedback from your players can be super useful. We all have our own blind spots, and a lot of the time someone else has to point them out for us because we're too close to our own creations to be objective. But take it all with a grain of salt though. Those players, they can be tricksy. If you're asking for feedback, try to be as specific as you can be. For instance, how did you feel my pacing was for this session? Or, how can I make the portrayal of my NPCs better? Or, did I adequately describe the situation? The answers will sometimes be illuminating. And regularly check in about how the campaign is going. See if your players like the themes or the campaign's direction. And if not, make sure you're sorting that stuff out as early as you can. Lots of stuff in the game can change over time. It is collaborative storytelling, after all. Bonus round. Fight! If you've made it this far, you're already well on your way to awesome, but there's one really crucial thing you should know. There's a lot of stuff to get right when running a game, and you're going to do fine. The best advice I've got for this is don't panic. We've all been there. The most seasoned and grizzled graybeard like me were once wide-eyed with wonder, and we had many of the same questions you might have right now. This stuff isn't as hard as it seems, and no matter what us talking heads might tell you, experience is the best teacher. As long as you and your pals are having a good time, everything else will sort itself out. I think it beats the crap out of watching TV. Matt Colville says it's the most fun you can have with your brain, and I think he's right. And in the end, you and your players had fun because you took the chance to run the game. Kudos. To learn more tips and tricks like these to make your role-playing games a little bit more awesome, start now by subscribing and hitting the bell so you can stay in the know. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on Sunday.